The director's sort of in there drafting, doing, executing, whereas a COO is much more leadership and vision and, responsible for the implementation, but not actually doing the implementation. And I think that's another area around which I did not have a lot of clarity for myself or the team in the early days. And so I think they were expecting this new person to come in and behave like the rest of the directors.
All right, we've got a really interesting podcast episode today. We have Lincoln Goldfinch, and she is going to be talking to us around how she has recruited, interviewed, hired, and onboarded her COO, how to build that killer relationship with the COO. It's one of the rare times we've ever had a CEO or entrepreneur interviewed on the podcast. You'll love this one. This is one you'll want to share. You can also watch all of our Second in Command podcasts inside our Second in Command podcast YouTube channel. Thanks very much for sharing with us on the Second in Command podcast. I really appreciate this today.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I've reached out to a bunch of CEOs that we've been talking to over the last few years just to find out more about how they work directly with a second in command. And it's a really kind of a unique perspective. I've had about 450 COOs on our podcast, and I've only ever interviewed 2 or 3 CEOs on the podcast. One who had his COO was one of our very first COO Alliance members, and he, over a couple of years, moved that COO into the CEO role so he could move into the chairman role. And then you're going to be giving us perspective on kind of how you found a second in command, what you were looking for, and how you've onboarded them. So maybe just tell us a little bit before we go in about your business, about the law firm, what you focus on, and then we'll kind of dive in on the COO stuff.
Sure. Well, very quick background into me. I have an immigration law firm. I went into immigration as a law student where my first assignment was to do an intake with this family of detained asylum seekers. And they had a little baby who was 5 months old, and she was wearing this prison uniform. And her mom asked me if I could take care of her while, they were in this detention center. It was one of these absolutely life-changing moments in law school for me. And so I was able to take that case and represent that family and win their asylum case, and I was hooked for life. And so I've been doing what I would say is individual and family-based immigration ever since, and my firm has been open for about 10 years. We're based in Texas, and we do family-based immigration. We like to say we bring peace of mind and security for immigrant families.
Wow. And I guess where we are in North America right now with some of the laws that are being changed and the new president coming back in, your business is going to be busier than ever.
Yeah, let's just say it's been a very wild and intense week.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm glad for you, and I'm not glad too, because I know you actually deal with some of the heartstrings and all this stuff. Thank you for doing the work. I think it's important work that you're doing, and I appreciate that. Can you talk to us about how you first decided you needed a second in command and what you started looking for and how you figured out what you were looking for?
I had my first second in command 2 years ago. The first second in command is still with me. And at that point, I had developed the various departments at my firm. I probably had around 100 employees in the US and then abroad. And I had, the marketing team and the finance team and the sales team and the legal department, et cetera. And what I was experiencing was that I was doing a just enormous lift in facilitating the communication amongst those teams. And I was doing a lot of what I describe as the plate spinning, sort of every day I was just going around and spinning all the plates and making sure everybody was fortified and knew what they were doing and could talk to each other. And I was unable really to step away because there was no one in between all of those departments. And it was of, desperation and necessity, I think, that I finally got to the point. I'd been hearing over the years and law firm coaching programs that, at a certain level, you need a PLA or a COO. And I just sort of thought, well, not me. It's like we always think these things don't apply to us sometimes. But I got to the point where it was like, I really can't step away from this and obtain freedom. And so I started looking.
So you didn't have the time to actually work on the business because you were so deep kind of in the weeds, and you also didn't have any time to grow the people as well. You were kind of managing them, but you didn't have time to ever develop them or grow their skills or grow their confidence. So you started to identify that as the core need. What did you decide you were looking for? How did you start to describe the role in your head to know what a job description or job posting might look like? And because you knew there was a need, but you didn't really know what you're looking for. So walk us through that step.
Well, what I would say is don't do it the way that I did it.
Awesome.
Because I was, I mean, it worked out for me, but that was by pure chance, I think, because I remember actually when I found my COO and I went to my leadership team meeting and I said, we're getting a COO. And my legal director said, what is that? What do they do? And I said, well, I'm going to get back to you on that. It's like, I was very unclear. So I didn't do the pre-work of getting very clear about the skill set and the job description and then go and find the person. Instead, what happened was I ran into a friend of mine who's a recruiter at a party and I said, hey, I think I need a really good ops person. And she said, oh, I know the person for you, and then connected us and it worked out, but do not recommend.
So you got really lucky then. I've always described that as the equivalent of somebody waking up in the morning and saying, wow, I really need a husband. And somebody saying, oh, I've got a guy, he could be your husband. Like, that's a horrible idea, right? Because you don't. So what would you suggest then? And knowing what you know now, if you had to go out and do it again, I know you're not out looking for a second, but if you were out looking for a second one, what would you do differently now?
I would start with the exhaustive wish list of all of the skills that I would want. And I would look for a lot of the things that I do on that list and just sort of brain dump everything that in a dream world this person would handle. Then I would convert that into a realistic job description. And then I would, post it and do the recruitment. And I think even one of the things that I've anecdotally experienced with some of my other law firm owner friends is it's such an important role. You're second in command, and often people jump in and they hire a person and then it doesn't work. And they're in these like really difficult situations trying to navigate that. So if there's an opportunity to work with someone as on a contract basis or or have some sort of like date before you get married for a role like this, I would recommend that as well.
Okay. So one of the things that I always talk about is that if a company got really, really good at interviewing and doing proper reference checks, they wouldn't need the dating period as much. I'm curious what your thoughts are around that. I mean, I know that, yes, it would be amazing if you did have that, but do you think if you knew all the questions to ask and you could really grill the person and have multiple people interview them and you could do the proper reference checks and behavioral profiling, do you think you could trust the system enough? Or do you think you would still love to have a bit of that dating period? I'm curious what your gut is on that.
I think I could go with you on that. If it were a really robust onboarding procedure, and I would say adding on the trial period after the hire. So you go through all that and then you say, okay, for the first 90 days, this is what we're doing. Because, what if there's a mutiny or, there's just the way this person actually communicates or leads doesn't work well with the team. I think there's some of those things that you only find out after the fact, but maybe that's just me.
Well, once we were hiring a head of sales at 1-800-GOT-JUNK back in the day, and I had the 6 people that were going to be reporting to the VP of sales. They did 2 rounds of interviews with their potential boss. So they grilled the heck out of this person. So by the time that we said, yes, we're hiring them, they were actually pretty excited. So that's a layer of a process that most companies never think of doing.
That's brilliant. And I think everybody who's listening needs to do that, because if this person is in upper level leadership, that's everybody to whom, who will be reporting to this person should weigh in.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I mean by if a company had the proper interviewing system. So I cover some of that in I invest in your leaders online training program in the module on interviewing. It's also stuff that I coach CEOs on in my group coaching. But anyway, so okay, we got that process. Now you've hired this person, you kind of got lucky in your process. They're starting to work with you. What was your onboarding with them like? And what would you change on your onboarding?
I would have been more clear about what it was. Instead, I said, let's just work side by side. Let's do a lot of shadowing. And then, sort of here's the one-off tasks as we're getting comfortable. But we had a plan. We had an onboarding plan. But in retrospect, I think I would have been more clear on that. And I wouldn't have had this person sort of feel like they had to prove themselves in the first 90 days before they really got to know everything. Because then you've got this sort of like, I don't know, it's maybe coming in too strong or trying to make a difference or trying to, just exactly. And I think if you sort of like create space for that not to be a necessity.
Yeah. I just kind of did my happy dance, which is why you said exactly as I was kind of cheering you on. If people are just listening, they couldn't hear what the you were saying exactly for. Yeah, I 1,000% agree that in that first 30 days, the person should make 0 decisions.
Yeah.
They should only meet every leader. They should only sit in on all the business areas. They should be absorbing as much as possible. And they should be looking for things that they want to do differently, ideas they want to put in place, changes they might want to make. And they make a long list and they do none of them. And in the second month, they go back and stress test all of their ideas. Like maybe they walk in going, I need to fire Kelly. And after meeting with a few more people, they go, nope, I need to handcuff Kelly. I need to fire Bob. But it's by stress testing in month 2, all of their ideas. And then in month 3, they can start working on some of the easy, low-hanging fruit projects that all of a sudden gain the trust of the team and the team starts seeing momentum. Second quarter, they can start making the tough decisions. But I think when we let the person come in too early or we don't set them up for that, don't try to make any big decisions early. It's actually going to come and bite you in the ass a little bit more. So I think you saw it in the right way. So you got them onboarded. They're kind of settling into their role. What's your day-to-day look like with your second in command now? What was the title you put on that second in command? And can you walk us through, I don't know if you're willing to share what comp is or what their roles and responsibilities are?
My second in command is the COO, and probably I shouldn't discuss comp because I haven't cleared it with her. But what I can say is our day-to-day is we have a daily meet at a specific time, and we have a document where we sort of keep the running issues at hand. But we have at this point, clarity around who is running which department. What we had, I think, for too long was overlap. And part of this was, another big mistake I made was my nerves about letting go and sort of turning over, trusting this other person. And so we were duplicative in a lot of ways for quite some time. And it worked out fine for us. But I think if I had it to do over again, I would go back and say, okay, you're doing this and I'm doing that. And at the meetings you're leading, I'm not there, and vice versa, because it ended up being a little bit messier. But now there's more clarity around who is running which department and which project. And then, really regular communication between the two of us.
I love your daily sync. Do you have a brand around what that meeting is called? And can you walk us through how many minutes and what you cover? Do you have a kind of an agenda, or is it just a catch up? Can't imagine it's just a catch up.
It's not just a catch up. I don't know what we call it. One-on-one, I think is what it's called on the calendar, or check-in maybe. And it changes day by day. It's whatever we've got in the agenda. That was one change, as we went from just meeting and talking about what needed to be talked about without orienting the other one in advance to having an agenda so it's all there and we know what we're discussing. And, a lot of things can be managed in chat between us, but knowing that we've got that meeting and it's going on the agenda, like if it requires a conversation, that's where it goes, so that we don't end up interrupting and bugging each other throughout the day in the chat with things that really need a conversation. So it's about a 30-minute meeting. Sometimes it's less than that. And we just say, okay, I'm thinking this. Do you agree? Yes, no, why? Down the agenda.
I'll tell you what, one of the big things that we figured out around company culture, was anytime you can brand a meeting and put kind of a label on it that's kind of your culture, your culty kind of name, it somehow elevates the company to the next level, right? So yeah, and I don't know why that is, but it's around culty, right? It's a terminology that only the people inside get, and nobody understands. So we would have our war meeting. Nobody understood what our war meeting, but it was our weekly action review. Or we had our storm meeting. Our storm was our strategic meeting. And then we had huddle. Nobody really understood huddle. So when we would brand these meetings, we knew like, hey, it's time for huddle. People on the other side are like, what's huddle? And they wanted in, right? They wanted to be inside with the tribe. So yeah, put a brand on it.
Okay.
And I agree that I love having the daily whatever, whether it's a check-in, adrenaline meeting, whatever you're going to call it, because it does prevent the misinformation of chat. And often if I had like 7 things on my list to talk to a VP or a CEO about, the 7 things by the time I show up for the meeting might be like, oh, that solved itself. This was stupid. Don't need to ask you this one, right? Otherwise, I'm just sending everything over by Slack. I'm interrupting their day. I'm taking up their time without actually being a little bit more thoughtful. So I like the fact that you added to a list, you show up and you can communicate it. Do you ever find that some of the stuff on your list, you don't even need to talk about when the meeting's happening?
Yes. And exactly to that point. I mean, our old habit was to just be on chatting throughout the day. And even if one of us was in a meeting, the other one would chat them with a quick question. And it is so interruptive. It just takes you off track. And so, yeah, you put it on the agenda and then by tomorrow midday, it's resolved itself in many instances. So true.
Well, and it prevents you from being in sync because you see the world differently and perceive the world differently than your COO does. Have you done your Colby A profile and have they done theirs? Or have you done personality profiles?
We have done personality profiles and we have very different personalities.
Exactly. It's kind of like men are not hairy versions of women, right? So we see the world differently. We perceive it. That's why they wrote the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, is so we can actually understand how to communicate and collaborate. If a COO, I guarantee you, your COO would love to send you all the facts and all the figures and all the data because they're probably bigger, but you want the bottom line. You just need the executive summary. So if they're sending you a page of information and all you need was 1 sentence, when you have the meeting, you actually get the 1 sentence sync. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. I much prefer that method, just a quick summary in a meeting as opposed to like the big long email with all the explanations.
And then they probably want more explanation from you, but they can ask you some questions, which allows you just to think out loud and get it out of your head.
Right. And sometimes, we're local to each other. So sometimes like, oh, okay, this is like a harder, longer conversation or it's strategy or vision. Let's meet and go somewhere nice in person, have some more space around it.
Yeah, we used to do walk and talks. We'd go for coffee, go for lunches, sit at tennis clubs. A lot of that gets you in sync, but I'm glad you're doing that. So you've got your COO. Do they have the COO title? And did you agonize or think about the title at all when you were bringing them in?
I did. I don't have a C-suite otherwise. I have I have directors. So this is the only position in the C-suite. And so it was like, for me, I felt, I don't know if it was like imposter syndrome or something. At that point, I thought, who am I to bring in a C-suite person? But the person I brought in was clear that this title was important to her. And so it worked. And now I understand somewhat the differences between a director of ops. And then I think kind of in the legal realm, a PLA is the same as a COO.
So let's say you went from a director to a vice president of operations to a COO. What would you see as being different in those layers? Like what does a COO bring into the organization that might be different from a director or a VP level?
Yeah, to me, it's all about how dirty are the hands getting, essentially. So the director's sort of in there drafting, doing, executing, whereas a COO is much more leadership and vision and, responsible for the implementation, but not actually doing the implementation. And I think that's another area around which I did not have a lot of clarity for myself or the team in the early days. And so I think they were expecting this new person to come in and behave like the rest of the directors. We have one of our core values is in this together. So we're all always helping each other out. And so someone coming in and saying, this is the plan, this is how I want you to do it, and here's the resources you need was a different feeling than people were used to. And so I wish I would have thought about that distinction and explained it to people in advance of bringing in this new role.
Yeah, well, and now you actually see that because that is more true C-suite as well, as when they come in with the plan. Do you find that you don't have to delegate much to them, that they actually understand what needs to get done and they're letting you know what needs to get done and you're saying yes, versus a director level where you're delegating to and showing them the work and often even telling them how to do it?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. But, I'm able to make the business plan and the big vision, and then she's able to come in and help figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah. So I've often said that the C-level, a true C-level, whether it's a CFO, CMO, CTO, whatever, the true C-level of a business area or the org should come in with a level of strategic insight where they can actually tell you and help you figure out where to go and how to get there. That they come in with enough P&L responsibility that they understand budgeting and cash flow and the balance sheet, and they can actually manage some of the financials of the business. They can make financial decisions. They understand how to balance the yeses and nos. They can actually manage conflict and tough discussions. Like they can say no more often than they say yes. Often younger managers or early stage managers, they find it hard to say no to people, and their answer to everything is hire more people. A true C-level, their answer is never hire more people. That's kind of the last thing they want to do, is have more people. And they come in with a level of autonomy that they can do the job day to day without you having to give them stuff to do. And then lastly, they often bring people with them. A C-level often brings more junior employees, suppliers, partners. Like they can bring, did you find that at all, that they actually had relationships they brought into your business?
Yes, that did happen. It was more over time. It wasn't immediate, but yes, over time, absolutely. She's been able to bring in other people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the directors don't really know anybody. They just know other junior people, right? They don't know, they didn't have access to the stuff. So I think it's interesting. You've got the right person in the right seats. Tell me about the time when it went sideways and you had to work through conflict. You know, it's like a marriage where, you know, every day isn't perfect. There's tough discussions you got to have once in a while, and you have to work through those fights. How did you work through one of those tough discussions or tough situations?
You know, I would say the biggest issue is that under my leadership, we had a culture of leniency. And, you know, I'm all about like, is everybody okay, and good vibes and fun, and sort of the metrics and the results are second to, is everybody having a good time? It's not great. And she came in very much from a background of a culture of accountability, but also a background in big law, which is just an extremely different culture. And so some of the conflicts that have happened for us has been the cultural mismatch. And so what'll happen is, if she'll come in with, you know, sort of I'll say corporate, just a perspective of accountability expectation, and then someone will get upset. They won't like it. They won't like the method of communication. Then they'll come to me, and my instinct is to smooth and make everybody happy and just, you know, do whatever needs to be done to reduce the drama. And then she would feel not backed by me or unsupported. And this sort of goes back to this business of like the duplication of work between us, where we'd both be working on the same issue with the same people, and I'd be trying to smooth it out and she'd be trying to save money, you know. And then, so we've had, I think, a handful of conflicts over those issues where I'll come to her and say, hey, the way this happened, created this issue. And then she'll respond and say, yeah, but it's really important, and here's why. And most of the time I end up apologizing.
Yeah, it's because it's funny. Like I'm trying to show something right now, but there's two sides to every story. Like there's his side and there's her side, and somewhere in between is the truth. When an employee comes to a CEO with a problem, there is another side of the story. And before we say, oh, we got to fix that, we need to ask the other person. So what I try to do if somebody ever comes to me is I go, have you talked to the COO about the problem you're having with them? No, let me coach you how to have that discussion with them. I'm not going to engage with you on the actual problem. I'm going to coach you on how to go and have that discussion with them, and then come back and tell me how that discussion goes. But I'm not actually going to engage on the problem. I'm going to coach you on how to deal with your own problems. Then you're not going to the COO telling her what happened, her going, no, there's another side. And you're like, I didn't know the other side. Yeah, it's because you engaged versus coached. The second part is if the employee goes, no, I haven't, and I don't feel comfortable. Okay, do you want me to kind of moderate or mediate? You know, I'll get the two of you together and I'll coach both of you through the discussion. But again, I'm not going to solve it for you. That's another way that you can kind of elevate your game as a CEO too.
Yeah, I love that first one, and I have done more of that of late, and it's gone well. And if, you know, again, it's like if I could rewind time, I would have started with that.
Well, that's the way you're growing, but it's the same thing when companies have an HR department. Don't ever let HR become the union steward. HR's job is to teach employees how to go have the discussion, not to triangulate the discussion. You don't ever want someone in HR talking to Molly and then going over and talking to Bob and then coming back and talking to Molly. Screw that. Go get Molly and Bob to talk to each other. Teach them how to talk to each other, so that then you've grown their skills, you've grown their confidence, you've grown their collaboration, and you get out of their way.
100% on that. And isn't it, I mean, this is the hard stuff. And it really, I mean, it's so important in leadership and leading a company. But these are the things that I spend my time on, you know.
What's the stuff they don't teach you in law school too, right? They don't say, hey, you want to go run your own company. Like, you get no training as lawyers on how to run a company, do you?
No, quite the opposite. It's like running a good business is kind of, I don't know, a lot of people think that makes you a bad lawyer.
No, but like, imagine allowing somebody to go through business school and their MBA and then saying, oh, you can be a lawyer. No, that's ludicrous. Why do we let lawyers and doctors and engineers and chiropractors and accountants and like go and start a business without any business? I talked to a dentist who went through 7 years of dental training, had 1 hour of business training, and he was allowed to go start a practice. That's malpractice.
Wow.
Right?
Well, crazy. And it's also true for lawyers. Yeah. Hanging out at ankle. Yeah.
Like, last quick question here is, the day-to-day relationship. This is your business spouse, right? This is your business wife, your business husband. So how do you stay friends? How do you have date night? What do you do with them to stay liking each other?
Yeah, we hang out, we go to dinner, we go do fun things, we go to fun conferences together. When we have our in-person meetings, we go somewhere nice, we buy each other gifts, we do Christmas gifts, and all of that is really important, because there have been moments where we've sort of gotten too busy and we've fallen off of that. And then 3 months later, where we realize, like, hey, we're a little out of touch. We need to touch it. Yeah.
I'm Kate Lincoln Goldfinch. Thanks so much for sharing with us on the Second in Command podcast. Really appreciate your insights today on the COO relationship.
I think one of the things I'm still working on, and I've always taken pride in, though, is I'm good at getting done, right? High executive function. And that can be a good superpower, but also, like, the other side of that coin is it often prevents you from becoming really good at delegating and leveraging a team.